Okay, so now we move to our third guest speaker. I'd like to introduce everyone who hasn't met Phillip, Tsokolibane from South Africa. Phillip's, just a bit of background. Phillip has been with the LaRouche South Africa movement since 1992. Now, that movement in South Africa came about when one of our US associates and our good friend Al Douglas visited the Republic of South Africa back then in the course of doing research into an organisation called Lonrho, which is a London and Rhodesia mining country controlled by the British Crown itself, and it's part of the Queen's personal fortune. And he went through a research program which ended up in the production of this book called Tiny Roland, the Ugly Face of Neocolonialism in Africa. It's on the book table, it's for sale. We've actually produced copies of it. It's an antique book. You may not have seen this one before, but it goes through that history. Very, very interesting. Now, back in those days, 1992, when we first moved to Melbourne, when Al was working with myself and Nolene to found the CEC as the arm of the International LaRouche movement, there was a known MI5 ASIO agent here by the name of David Grierson. And he was organising some pretty nasty demonstrations against us and writing some pretty nasty inflammatory articles against us. In one of them, he observed with surprise that, quote, "The CEC works late at night, and what in the world are they doing calling South Africa?" Well, now you know, with Phillip's presence here, the CEC was refounded at the same time as the South African organisation was being founded. And it was out of the same process, and here we are together, 23 years later, at this conference. Back then in 1992, the original leader of the LaRouche movement in South Africa was Phillip, who died in the late 1990s. And then Phillip stepped up to fill his shoes to ensure that the movement continues to this day. So we're very privileged and very happy that Phillip's been able to join us from South Africa to give us, his understanding of what developing Africa through the BRICS means. So please welcome Phillip.
Good afternoon. I know back at home is good morning. It's well into the night. You are about 9 hours ahead of us. So I should be sleeping by now, but I'm here with you. My name is Ramasimong Phillip Tsokolibane. I know you can't pronounce my first name and even my surname, but Phillip is okay. I'm proud to say that I represent the LaRouche movement in South Africa, like Craig has just said. I've come to realize both the awesome power and responsibility this gives me, representing the most important person and greatest thinker of our time or of any time, whose very name strikes terror in the cold hearts of the enemies of the human race, most notably that evil whore of Babylon, the Queen of England, and a cadaver-like Nazi consort, His Royal Virus Prince Phillip. It strikes fear in their toadies such as American President Barack Obama, their very own house nigger, as I saw firsthand when we literally took over a demonstration of hundreds with a famous mustache poster when Obama defiled our nation in a visit in 2013. The oligarchs' monetary system, which enslaves nations and the minds and bodies of their peoples with imposed and illegal debts, is finished. The time has come to make LaRouche's vision of a new, just, world economic order the reality. We represent the future of mankind. It is our time if we choose to seize this opportunity. And if we say we are going to win and doing nothing, then the British will always prevail. We have to work hard, put in efforts like never before. If we fight, we'll win. But if we just say the ways that we'll win and fold our arms, it will never be done. But we represent the future of mankind. It is our time if we choose to seize this opportunity. For all their piles of worthless money, this oligarchy cannot stop us because it cannot crush mankind's potential for creativity in the service of its immortal ideals of truth and reality, which Mr. LaRouche and his wife, Helga, have represented in their lifetime. As I flew over the vast ocean on my way to this meeting, I began to reflect upon who I am as part of this movement. There I was, suspended in the air, traveling at high speed. What a wonderful creature man is to have created such a means of conveyance. Birds can fly because they have been given that ability to fly. Man, through his creativity, made himself capable of flight. No other creature could do something like this by intent. No other creature has been given this capability by the Creator. That's the creativity of man. We are not born with wings. But yes, I flew over here with about maybe 500 people on board. I didn't fly alone, but we flew. So that's the creativity of man. That's what we are here to do. I think you have just listened to Dennis talking about China going to the moon. That's creativity. Going to the moon to try and mine helium-3. No species could do that, but men can do. That's the creativity. That's what we have been given by our Creator. So we've got to use that. Yes, we are here. I think other people are busy with the cricket. That's entertainment. That was what the Romans used to do in the Colosseums. Entertainment. Give them entertainment. So give them cricket. And you'll always be Australia down under what? Down under the foot of Queen Elizabeth. I looked up and realized that we are not even bound to this planet or even this mortal coil. Man has traveled into the near space and to the moon, and our minds have ventured even beyond that. With our deep space probes such as Voyager, we are on Mars with a rover. China has sent its lunar rover with a mission to make it possible eventually to mine the moon for helium-3 as fuel for the coming age of fusion power here on Earth. We've already mentioned that. So we are, in fact, with our knowledge and actions, organizing nearby space as well as more distant reaches of our solar system. Just as the great Johannes Kepler understood we must 400 years ago. Kepler was living in the stars, even as he was dying of starvation here on Earth. As a result of the policies of the same decadent oligarchy that now drives the world to the brink of thermonuclear extinction. Kepler believed, as Nicholas of Cusa before him, in the possibility of man in a future created by man's knowledge of the universe as a force changing the universe for the better by our action. This is the awesome power of the human mind that Mr. Lyndon LaRouche connected me to, for which I will be always or forever grateful and humble. Maybe if I hadn't met Mr. LaRouche, I wouldn't have known about all this. So I will be forever grateful and humble for that. But I think one nice thing is that he didn't keep it to himself. That's what men must do. That's precisely what we must do. Our duty is to teach others. Those who are enjoying cricket, it's our duty to teach them that we are men, we are here with a mission. What's important is when you come to my funeral, I always visualize that. When you come to my funeral, what's important is that what this man has left for mankind. Not a beautiful car, not a beautiful house. Because we are mere mortals, but we are capable of becoming immortals. People say, no, it's impossible. Yes, we'll die, but die in flesh, but the spirit. That's why we can still talk about Kepler, Kuza today. They long died, but we are still talking about them today because we are reliving what they have lived, and it's taking us up. So when you come to my funeral, what will be important is that what I have left behind for you. When times become difficult, what did you learn from me? Yes, the old man might go, Lyndon LaRouche might go, but what is going to leave behind? It's important. I think we are sure that we can take on the British Empire even without him, simply because he has taught us. We are now men and women who can take this cross on our shoulders and fight. Yes, when he started the youth movement, people are saying, no, what's this? But he was into the future, because without the youth, this organization will not live forever. So we have to invest in the youth. I see, yes, it's good to have old people here, but where are the youth? We've got to invest in the youth. But the old people must teach the youth. They won't just come by themselves if the elders are not there to take them along. Kepler believed, as Nicholas of Cusa before him, in the possibility of man in a future created by man's knowledge of the universe as a force changing the universe for the better by our actions. I thought back to the place where I came from, a township, a ghetto just outside of Johannesburg, overrun with great misery, with no indoor plumbing, few paved streets, and throughout the entire country, unreliable electric power. These are the conditions in the townships where I come from. Much worse off are the shack dwellers, the squatters, hundreds of thousands of them in the Johannesburg area alone, who have had to scavenge pieces of wood, bricks, plastic sheets, and corrugated iron to make homes for themselves in what are called informal settlements. In the townships and informal settlements, poverty and unemployment are so high that they are not only demoralizing, they are murderers. I see many people die before their time of poverty and disease, including AIDS, in a genocide that could be prevented. Every Saturday, like yesterday, is reserved for burials. So which means we can't have a conference on a Saturday. It's reserved for funerals, because we really bury people on Saturdays. I ask myself, how can all this unhappiness be reconciled with that great power of the human mind that places man in command of the solar system? My answer was it cannot be reconciled. It is a perversion and incommensurable. So I say to you, do not try to accept or to reconcile them. Reject this current system and change it by imagining a different world and bringing it into being. That is the only way to solve this problem created by the continued existence of the perverted and decadent monetarist world order. Think and live in the stars. Think and live in the future, just as Kepler did. South Africa is a member of what is called the BRICS group of nations. Together they form the seed crystal of a new economic system for the organization of human productivity, the replacement of the dime monetary system. But where did the idea for the BRICS come from? It is the result of the process set in motion by Mr. LaRouche's attack on the bestial and murderous intention of the monetary system dominated by the British Empire. And his proposal exactly 40 years ago to replace it with what he called the International Development Bank. It was through the organizing of Mr. and Mrs. LaRouche in Russia, China and India in particular that laid the foundation for the BRICS, no pun intended. It's for those people who are not aware of what the LaRouches have been doing since this movement was formed. Helga Zepp LaRouche was at times called the Silk Road Lady. So this is what the LaRouches have been doing all along. It didn't just come out as BRICS. People had to work very hard for the BRICS to be where it is. So because I see the great poverty of Africa, I've resolved to work tirelessly to create a new systemic solution to that problem, recognizing that the monetary system seeks to solve the African problem by murdering our populations. I must make you see that finding a human solution to this crisis is not some intellectual exercise. It is an urgent matter of life and death. There is a sobering reality brought to this fight when you finally and fully realize that if you fail, you and millions upon millions will die. That is the responsibility that we who can see into the future must bear. I feel its weight daily. Well, going to the future is like, in the Bible where somebody went to the mountain. Even Martin Luther King Jr. mentions that in his famous speech, that you've got to go to the mountain like Moses and see the promised land. So if you can realize that, if you can see the promised land, if you can see the future, then you can rather go and play cricket. But what is good with this organization is that we always go to the mountain. We always uphold that the future determines the present. What we are doing today is going to be realized tomorrow. Simply because we've gone into the future. We've seen the promised land. We've already seen, while others haven't seen, what BRICS will bring for humanity. That's why we are having this conference today. That Australia must join. Well, the professor said not everybody will join. But even if not by joining, but being with BRICS in spirit, so that when you want loans, you can go to BRICS. My President Zuma said, the new development bank, it's a new bank. It's a bank where you come and say, I need a loan. You won't live without a loan. Unlike the IMF, unlike the World Bank. Well, pessimism is not permitted. I remain optimistic and have evidence for my optimism. Consider this, the inevitable, as some foolish people might believe, is really never so, not as long as we remain creative human beings. Kaplan Mr. LaRouche teach us this. My late former president, the founder of modern South Africa, Nelson Mandela, thought like this. He was repeatedly told, even by his closest supporters, that to free South Africa from the evil apartheid system will require a bloodbath. It was unavoidable, or so the British wanted us to believe. But Mandela imagined a different way, one that foiled British-inspired efforts to drown our nation in blood. To make this work, he had to recruit his so-called enemy, President F.W. de Klerk, to his view of a peaceful transition. And while many thought this impossible, Mandela organized de Klerk as his partner. And together they organized both black and white South African to see the common interest and common future. Yes, we could have gone through the bloodbath like other countries who are our neighbors. Angola, Mozambique. I don't know if you know about those countries. They went through the bloodbath. What they had achieved under colonial rule was erased. They are trying to develop, which is difficult. Imagine if South Africa had gone through that way. We are the only country in Africa which has nuclear power plant. That could have gone because the British would have just wiped it off. Because even up to today, they are not happy that we have that capability. So really, President Mandela played an important part. But for Mandela's dream of a prosperous South Africa to be realized, he needed international allies. And while he received pompous and pious words of support, the British saw to it that there were no real funds for solely needed development projects. The United States of America also failed to provide such aid. It was during Clinton's time. Had the BRICS existed then, Mandela would have found such allies in the fight for prosperity. During World War II, the great American president Franklin Roosevelt traveled through Gambia, a British colony in West Africa, on his way to his meeting with Churchill at Casablanca. He was appalled at the poverty he saw and how the British justified it. This, according to his son Elliot, who traveled with him, deepened his resolve to end once and for all the British Empire and all its imperial systems of colonial enslavement. FDR realized that nations needed to escape not only political shackles, but economic colonialism as well. He was committed to great economic development for Africa and embraced an idea of building up industry and infrastructure throughout the continent. His plan involved using Australia, your nation, as an economic launching point for development, creating whole cities of industry and technology to which millions of Africans and Chinese as well would be brought to work and to learn the secrets of technology and modern industry that they then could applying their own nation. So I suspected once you were a big nation. In the war, Australia was assigned the mission of serving as a massive training base for Allied forces, while also marshalling material resources for the war effort. But in FDR's planning for a new war on colonialism, he wanted Australia to break away from the British Empire and ally with the US to develop its industry, expand its population, and serve as a base for the industrialization of Africa, China, and India. It is certain that these ideas were discussed with our visionary Prime Minister John Curtin, who shared much of FDR's outlook and who FDR wanted to recruit to his anti-colonial crusade. Unfortunately, both men died before their dream could be realized. We need to revive such a development perspective today around the BRICS as the only pathway away from the thermonuclear war, which must never allow to become inevitable. If we have the moral fitness to survive, we will do this. If we have the moral fitness to survive, we will do this. I have urged my fellow citizens to support the petition of the Schiller Institute that calls on the US to break with its current policy alignment with the British Empire and Wall Street, and join with the BRICS in supporting major economic development projects. We always run up against people who say, screw the US, we should go it alone. But that just won't work. The US must work with the BRICS, or else with the US on the wrong side, that initiative will be crushed, because they will simply be working with the BRICS against us. So we need America, the US, to work with us. Or else with the US on the wrong side, that initiative will be crushed. Right now, British agents in the US government, such as the Nazi in the State Department, Victoria Nuland, have unleashed a destabilization of South Africa to promote regime change. The intention is to take South Africa out of the BRICS. Even at this late hour, they still believe or think that they can take us out of the BRICS, and plunged South Africa into bloody chaos. My associates and I have exposed this plot. We will not let this happen. We have told our fellow South Africans that they must take on the mission of leading the development of Africa using the BRICS as the launching point. Take on development from that perspective, not merely for benefits internal to South Africa. I would urge you in Australia to do likewise. You are a big continent with a lot of possibilities, but you think small. Under British influence, we have become a small nation. Think big and act accordingly. Thinking big is precisely what is required when posing a development perspective for Africa. Its problems cannot be resolved piecemeal or country by country. That will never work. Africa must have projects that not only solve present urgent needs, but also to look to a prosperous future with cooperation among nations and peoples who, under the British Empire's economic colonialism, have often been driven towards murderous conflicts. Today, there are promising steps in the right direction. I will mention just three: the continent-wide transport infrastructure plan, the Cape to Cairo transportation and energy corridor, and the plans for nuclear power development in South Africa and Egypt. The African Union and China signed a memorandum of understanding in January 2015 to greatly improve expand and integrate Africa's continental transport systems, including high-speed rail, road, aviation, and other infrastructure necessary for industrialization. Even before their agreement with China, the African Union had initiated construction of the South-North Transportation Corridor of roads, rails, and bridges running from Cape to Cairo. The project should also include energy infrastructure, according to South African President Jacob Zuma. Nuclear power is coming to Africa through the efforts of South Africa and Egypt, though South Africa has a power plant, but this is going to be an addition. South Africa is committed to adding 9,600 megawatts of nuclear power capacity to its existing 1,800 megawatts of nuclear. Egypt plans to build reactors to provide 4,800 megawatts with Russia's help. The success of these projects will surely launch nuclear power planning throughout the continent. Yes, we have to start somewhere, but we believe and we hope that Africa will go nuclear. We will not only have nuclear in South Africa or Egypt. Make no mistake about it, it is absolutely impossible for both of our nations to fulfill our mission if we remain members of the British Empire, kissing the ugly rump of the British war queen who presides over the so-called Commonwealth. It is high time we grew up as nations and ended up all ties with the British Empire. Let us agree to toss all the pictures of this evil queen, the symbol of the evil that purports to rule this planet at present, into the bonfire of history, and let our peoples rejoice. It is tempting on this big continent to think that you might escape the West that happens in the rest of the world. South Africa has a similar problem, located all the way down on the tip of Africa. This is a delusion. If the rest of the world dies, or even a large portion of it, you will die eventually. As the 1960s novel by Neville Shute, On the Beach, though others have mentioned the movie, I'm talking about the novel. Rather than hide from the world, let us all together seize this moment to redirect our world. Look no longer down at your feet and your land. Look up with me to the stars and beyond. That is our common destiny. Thank you very much.
As we have Phillip here, I am going to take 10 to 15 minutes of questions for Phillip, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with the rest of the program. So he's here. Ask him. Morris. What do we do? Up to the mic, Morris. Up to the mic, please.
When we started the movement, this very strong commitment from me was there's only one race, that's the human race. Let's get serious. And we stuck to that because I grew up as a little boy in a droving camp, and an old black fella looked after me and he virtually raised me. So I never ever wanted to see people look at a man's colour of his skin, because it's the soul that counts. It comes from here. And I've always had a very soft spot for people from all over the world. And it started as my youth from the Aboriginal communities up there, and I'm still very, very involved with them. And I know through history, when we read history, what you said today is said by all great people from Gandhi to Martin Luther King. It's not about what you do while you're here, it's what you leave behind for the generations and the unborn children to benefit from that, and the world grows from that. Now, going back to, and incidentally, I'd like to take you home with me. What are you doing? We've got 2 Africans up there in our hospital, a doctor and a nurse, and they're fun. They're fun. And but anyway, back to conspiracies. The Ebola thing in Africa, we got about 2,500 have passed away so far. There's roughly 100,000 die from TB every year. I'm just wondering, where does Bayer and all these drug companies fit into this? Are they just getting ready for another kill? But it's just sad to see, people dying away. But I know that there are much bigger diseases in Africa that we don't even hear about that are killing our population. And the old eugenics crowd of the British Empire, they had the little Tutsis and stuff. It horrifies me, it horrifies me. Because Africa's such a massive continent, it hasn't even got a decent rail system, Had the French in the top and the Belgians in the middle, and these damn POMs down in the bottom. Did they tell you what the POM meant? They've told you what POM means? We call them POMs, prisoner of Her Majesty's service. But we weren't convicts, we were political prisoners.
Well, I think from the talk I can comment about the population. For those who might not know the policy of the population. The diseases like Ebola and all malaria and all other diseases, just like AIDS, are being used by the British as a depopulation tool. We do not have hospital or we do not have good health care in Africa. In other countries, it's non-existent. For those who followed the Ebola epidemic in the west of Africa, you would have seen that. Doctors who didn't even have gloves, sanitation gloves. That's the extent of our health facilities. This has been done deliberately so that they can bring such diseases to kill us, because it's their program of depopulation. So other countries or bigger countries or people who are able to help should look at Africa, should look at us, maybe through the eyes of this man who was walking from between Jericho and Jerusalem. Then there was this man who had been attacked. This man, 2 people passed, a priest and another man passed, but here's a good Samaritan. He asked himself, not what will happen to me if I help this man, but what will happen to this man if I do not stop to help him? So this should be the mentality of other countries when they look at countries like Africa. What will happen to Africa if we do not help it? That's where you find people like the Chinese are coming up with a win-win situation. Because if they do not help develop Africa, like the BRICS did, and the BRICS think that China and Russia will do the same thing. They keep telling us, no, this China is going to colonize you. You say, when did China colonize people? This is a China that has gone back to its roots, to Confucius. To those who do not know about Confucius, Helga touched on it yesterday. This is the mentality that comes out. They have gone back to that, where they want to help other nations. Because if you do not become my brother's keeper, who will? We have to be brothers' keepers. Well, if you are humans, I hope you are human beings. It's only the BRICS who think that they are they are gods, who think like that. We are human beings. I think I've tried to answer that, though it was not a question that much.
That's all right. No, you've answered it. Anyone else would like to ask a question? Yes, come up.
Like Gandhi of India and Africa, like the Nelson Mandela, his legacy left behind the fight for the betterment of humankind and of African nations. Do you think that that fight will become much stronger in his death?
It was very difficult for Nelson Mandela even to head his sheep, the ANC people, to make them see this future that he had for the country. Maybe it's simply because people were taught that we had to fight for our liberation. So when it came that now is the time for negotiations, it was a bit difficult. People were saying that we haven't achieved victory. How can we go on to the negotiations? We must defeat the enemy so that he gives up. We'll just run into Pretoria or Johannesburg with our troops and armored vehicles. But then Mandela decided, no, that's not the way to go. So it was difficult for him to sell that to his people. So with him out of the picture, there will be surely people who won't see the future that way. It takes a great leader to see that way, or to see through those eyes. But maybe, yes, there will be problems, but there will come a leader who will see into the future. The present leader, Jacob Zuma, has his problems, but we have decided as a movement to back him up, simply because we see this as an attack to the country, the institution of the presidency. If we let this regime change, what goes is South Africa, not Zuma, not the ANC. So I think these are some of the things that Mr. LaRouche has taught me, to go to the higher level. Like I just said, I look at myself at my funeral. What will you say when you come to my funeral? Will my corpse be, I'm a little bit to your complexion. But if I don't work hard for humanity, when you come to my funeral, my corpse will be dark because I will be angry that, oh, time cut me off. I didn't do enough. We're at a time or a moment in time where we do not judge a man by the color of his skin, the size of his nose, the clothes he wears, the food he eats. No. God made us in his image. And he gave us his begotten son, though I told Craig that my father was a priest, so I know the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have an everlasting life. Everlasting life, that's immortality. That's what Mr. LaRouche is teaching us. That's what we must strive to do. Everlasting. Not in flesh. I'm a mere mortal, I'm going to die. But what is it that I'm leaving behind? That's what's important. That whoever believes in him should have an everlasting life. We can have an everlasting life, the immortality.